Hey y'all, it's Dr. Ken. So look, one of my friends has these menstrual issues, and every time she asks me about it and what helps it, I always tell her to stop the sugar. And her question to me today was, how come every time I ask you about something menstrual, you tell me to stop eating sugar? How does sugar affect my menstrual cycle? And I realized that I never sat here and really explained it to anybody. So it's a very complex thing, but I think I can break it down for you to understand. So you got to listen. So let's try to break this down. I'm going to start off with a very healthy individual, right? That's very fit. There's no fat on their body. They're all fit and muscular, right? This person eats a Snicker, some processed sugar. What happens to their body? Let's go inside of their body and I'm going to tell you what happens. The body breaks that Snicker down and there's sugar or glucose in the bloodstream. Now your body processes that blood sugar by your pancreas producing insulin. You've heard of insulin, right? So insulin takes that sugar like a taxi cab and escorts it to some cells. And these cells are going to say, hey, yes, I need that sugar. I'm going to burn that sugar as energy. And so it's like, you know what, if you're going to do that, if you're going to keep bringing me sugar, that's great. I'm going to give you this key. So you just bring me the sugar. Okay. That's what happens. Now the sugar got burnt off and it's gone. Person doesn't have high blood sugar. Everything's good. Now, sugar's the devil. It's addictive. It's like a drug. So she's like, that Snicker was good. I need another one. And so she eats another one. Same thing happens. Gets processed, burns it off as sugar. Burns it off as energy. So now she's craving sugar. She's craving it in pasta, rice, potatoes, potato chips, juices, everything. So now she's got an overload of sugar. So her sugar in her blood is high. And to match that high sugar, her pancreas starts really pumping out insulin. And it's bringing it to the cells and bringing it into the cells. But after a while, the cells are like, hey, that's too much. You're doing too much. I don't want anymore. In fact, I'm going to change my lock so you can't do it anymore. And I don't want anymore because now I'm resistant to insulin. Have you ever heard of insulin resistance? That is what happens. Now the cells are resistant to the insulin. So now, even though insulin is doing its job by taking the blood sugar to the cells don't want it. So now the person has a high blood sugar. But the blood sugar is like, hey, what am I supposed to do? And the liver's like, hey, come over here. I got something for you. We can turn it into triglycerides. We could do whatever. So the liver is going to now take that blood sugar and it's going to turn it into adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is fat, little fat. And so that fat is now on your body and that comes from the sugar. Your sugar was turned into fat. Okay, let's go back to that cell, the one that changed the lock. You remember the cell, what it did? It burned it as energy. Now we have energy. Well, if it's not accepting and it changed the lock, how is it getting energy? So now that healthy lady who's gaining weight, she's tired. And now she's craving even more sugar because her body is telling her to take sugar so she can burn it as energy. But even though the cells are locked and they're letting her in, she's still craving it and she's still tired and she's drained and tired. But she keeps taking in more and more sugar, and she's gaining more and more weight. And so she's tired, she's gaining weight, her blood sugar has been elevated, her insulin, just because that blood sugar is going to turn into fat doesn't mean that pancreas is not stopping producing it. It's still producing it because every time there's sugar, that pancreas is going to produce more insulin. Okay. So we got fat, we got insulin. The insulin is just floating around because now it has no job because the cells don't want to do anything with it, but it just keeps getting produced. So hyperinsulinemia, that's high insulin, is now causing inflammation all over the body and it's also disrupting other hormones. So have you ever heard of your stress hormone, like cortisol? Well, it's affecting that as well. So your cortisol levels are going up. That's causing blood pressure issues, all that kind of stuff. But have you also heard of your estrogen, your progesterone, all those things that kind of help with your period, going on with your period? Those are your female hormones. Well, those are now going to come into play here. This is how sugar is going to affect them. So the cortisol levels are going up. Your progesterone is going to go down. And here's where the major part is. Your fat cells are now becoming an endocrine organ, just like your thyroid, your ovaries, your actual cells, the fat cells in your body are now producing hormones. And guess what hormone is producing? It's producing estrogen. So you got low progesterone, high estrogen just floating around. And then because you're eating all those potatoes and bread, your bowels aren't moving. So the bowels are not getting rid of the estrogen. The estrogen is just floating around. And now you have what's called estrogen dominance. And so when there's estrogen dominance, then there causes menstrual abnormalities because there's way too much estrogen. There's supposed to be a balance. Estrogen, progesterone, it's supposed to be opposed. And when there's more estrogen and there's low progesterone and the estrogen is just controlling everything, you have issues. You know, estrogen is the reason why your breasts grow. When you're in puberty, now they're aching. Now you're moody. Now you've got crazy acne. Now your period's doing this. Now you're bleeding because estrogen grows things. So it's growing the lining of your uterus. So now you're bleeding a whole lot. You're cramping a whole lot. Or now the insulin resistance is also causing your ovaries to dysfunction. So now you're not ovulating. And if you're not ovulating, you're still not producing progesterone. So that is how, in the longest, shortest version I can come up with, of how your eating sugar can affect your menstrual cycle. I hope that made sense.